To the press with Frances O'Grady, General Secretary of the Trades Union Congress. Welcome, Frances O'Grady.
Hello.
Peter Hitchens, columnist for the paper we've just been hearing about, its front page. Hello, Peter.
Good morning.
And Kate Richardson-Walsh won gold in the hockey at 2016, those Rio Olympics. Wow. Every time I even think of a gold Olympian, I want you to chew your medal for me.
Yes.
That's the essential.
I do it every morning.
Well, I know you all want to address what we've just been speaking about. Frances O'Grady, the Mail on Sunday front page, Minister sent his PA to buy sex toys.
Well, this is the latest episode in a growing storm about sexism and sexual harassment at work, where Mark Garnier, the Brexit trade minister, apparently sent his secretary out to buy sex toys for him.
We've just had a briefing on it. What's your view on it?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to understand that this isn't just about the Tories. It's not just about Westminster. It's about workplaces up and down Britain. The TUC did a survey showing that half of all women had experienced sexual harassment at work. That rises to 2/3 of young women. And we have to find a way to lift the responsibility of tackling it off the individual shoulders of women.
Well, speaking as a Victorian and a prude, I am absolutely overwhelmed with joy to see that feminism has finally realised that all this has gone too far. I'm amazed at the coarseness of conversation and behaviour in our society that's developed without any real complaint over the past decades, and really glad to see that at last what I would call the left is lining up against it, and it's an amazing development,
Well,
which I think should give pleasure to all Victorian prudes.
Feminists have always been keen to challenge abuses of power at work.
Not as much as they should have been.
Yeah, and I think it's a female and it's a male issue. I think the UN with their He for She campaign are very strong on this. It needs men and women to come together on this, and I think women are being very brave in speaking out, but we now need men to get on board with this as well. And it's not acceptable and it's not okay, and it needs to stop right now.
More Victorians, that's what we need everywhere.
Thank you for raising that issue and broadening it for us. Kate Richardson-Walsh, anywhere you like. It could be linked, I think it is.
On the Gove, yeah, Observer. I've got the Observer. So Gove says sorry for Weinstein joke that trivialised sex assault. Very similar topic, and just trivialising, I think James Corden went on recently and made a joke of it. This is not funny. And particularly Michael Gove, he's not a comedian. He's not being paid to crack jokes, maybe in his spare
Debatable.
time. But he's there to represent the people, and the people find this shocking and wrong, and he needs to stand up for that and say that.
But should people be made to apologise for bad jokes? If that happened, where would we be? There'd be no end to it.
But as I say, he's not a comedian. He's not there to make jokes.
Lots of comedians aren't comedians either, in my view.
How much
apologising seems to me to be going.
How much imagination does it take to know that it's wrong to say it in the first place? Mm-hmm. And if it is a problem, then maybe we need to do much more training at work, much more making men and women more aware of what's right and what's wrong.
But surely derision and or the silence of an audience which hasn't been made to laugh, although on this occasion note that the studio audience at the Today programme did laugh, should be punishment enough for a bad joke.
Yeah, but do you think, I've been in situations where the sheer shock of the situation, you don't know what else to do but laugh, and I don't think the laughter makes it okay. And I really feel that this was a pre-considered joke that went horribly wrong.
Well, perhaps the audience should be made to apologise for laughing.
He did apologise unreservedly. You've given us your views on it. Let's change the subject. So, Peter Hitchens, to what?
Well, I want to draw attention to a story in the Mail on Sunday about Jihadi Jack, this unfortunate child, in my view, who is obviously a very troubled person who's ended up in the Middle East and now is in a Kurdish prison, while his parents back in Oxford, my hometown, are being threatened with prosecution for sending money to him. The whole thing seems to me to be a tragedy rather than an incident of someone genuinely trying to become a terrorist. And if you read his as the Mail on Sunday describes them, anguished messages to his parents that he's been sending from his cell under Kurdish guard. You can see here there's somebody who needs assistance rather than prosecution. And I just think that Foreign Secretary Johnson, seeing this, really ought to take a look at the way in which British foreign policy has been addressing this case. It seems to me to be unjust.
OK, and Kate Richardson-Walsh, you've got a Sportswomen of the Year from the Sunday Times.
Yeah, there's a 4-page spread, 4 whole pages dedicated to female sport in the Sunday Times, which is unheard of. Unfortunately, it's a once-in-a-year opportunity because they had their awards this week, which is fabulous. But as we know, only 2% of national newspaper coverage is on female sport. And I get told time and time again that we don't have female sport in the papers because there are no stories. No, there's no interest. There absolutely is interest. 9 million people tuned into our final in Rio. People want to read about it. They want to watch it. So let's get more of it.
And do you want to give us a little portrait of one Sportswoman of the Year?
Yeah, Elise Christie won the main award. Speed track skater, just an incredible woman who has gone through some very difficult times in her career, death threats after Sochi, and has been absolutely consummate professional and come back strong, and we'll see her in Pyeongchang next year, hopefully winning more medals.
Thank you for pointing us. What's her name again?
Elise Christie.
You heard it twice here if you didn't already know it. So, Frances O'Grady, you can take us into the Huffington Post online or the Observer front page. It's up to you.
Huffington Post concentrating on universal credit, a troubled programme, as we know, with lots of people now calling for the government to pause the rollout of universal credit. First of all, there was that 55 pence a minute phone line for help. Then there was the 6-week wait with people going to food banks and loan sharks.
There was. And what does this article say?
Now this one is about the minimum income floor of over £1,000. That means that many low-paid self-employed people are missing out and being told that they would be better off going on the dole, which seems extraordinary for a benefit that was supposed to be all about making work pay.
The shock advice emerged as thousands of sole traders, from window cleaners to hairdressers and others, moved onto the flagship programme to receive their entitlements, the in-work tax credits.
The whole thing is the most incredible mess. I can't see why the government doesn't reverse its policy and get out of it very quickly. Everyone makes the comparison with the poll tax. I think it may even be worse. And it's everything you hear about it suggests that it's the law of unintended consequences passed yet again.
Well, the story gets picked up in the Sunday Times, focusing on tenant farmers, a third of them on less than the national minimum wage. Think what it's going to mean for groups like that who just don't know how much they're earning week to week.
A spokesperson for the Department of Work and Pensions said universal credit supports self-employed people for up to a year whilst they establish their business. If after a year the business isn't meeting the minimum income floor, then they will have to either increase their self-employed earnings or take on additional work. Peter...
that's easy, isn't it?
Well, we're just moving the subject.
Well, it's easy when real wages are falling all over the place, whether you're self-employed or not.
Peter, just if you want to talk to us about Christopher Booker in the Sunday Telegraph.
Well, I think it's an extraordinary thing that people should notice more. Christopher Booker has been one of the longest-standing opponents of EU membership in the country. Wrote the book, The Great Deception, about the reasons for leaving the EU. And he is furiously criticising the Brexit campaigners and their blindness to the dangers they're running in his column, and calling for the Norway option of remaining within the European Economic Area. And it seems to me to be amazing that a commentator with this track record has fallen out so much with what I think he would describe as the crude Brexiteers. And it should get more attention than it does. And again, I just feel it's one of those things that comes blazing out of the papers as an interesting thing which isn't getting enough attention.
Well, that reads across to the front page of The Observer, where we've seen hard Brexit donors to the Conservative Party turning up the pressure for a no deal. Again, potentially when people have power, like money, they can put enormous pressure on governments. But it does beg that question, why aren't we talking about more sensible options that are already out there that would allow us to protect jobs, livelihoods, workers' rights, and keep us in the single market?
That's the front page of the Observer. Tory donors warn May to ready UK for a no-deal Brexit. And Peter Hitchens looking at Christopher Booker in the Sunday Telegraph. We go back to the Mail on Sunday, Kate Richardson-Walsh. This is the NHS pressured our kids to change sex report.
Yeah, it's a report. They're feeling that children as young as 13 are being railroaded into changing gender by overzealous NHS therapists. I mean, I find it really fascinating that in the story they're talking about children being referred to specialists to talk about transitioning, to talk about the process. And from reading through it, this isn't an easy process. And this isn't a question of going to one clinic, one appointment, and you being reassigned your gender. This is a very long, painful process that takes years. And it doesn't necessarily always mean operations and hormones. And I think it's just the fact that young people, millennials, they're used to talking about this stuff, putting it out on social media and sharing their experiences. That doesn't mean they're selling it or promoting it. It just means they're sharing their experiences.
Yes.
What the parents are saying in this, though, is that the attitude of the psychotherapists who are seeing these people seems to be universally in one direction, that they accept immediately one interpretation of the way the person is feeling. Nobody doubts that these are young people in a state of considerable turmoil and that they need to be treated with great sympathy. But for the NHS immediately to assume, as it appears from this report to be doing, that the only solution is for them to proceed down the conveyor belt of transgenderism seems to me to be something which people are entitled to question. And the parents feel very left out of this, and I think it's important.
I think there's a big difference between railroading and listening. And I think too often young people with all sorts of issues haven't had somebody there to listen. And, you know, we should be proud that the NHS is there for them.
There's no shortage of listening. It's a question of what then happens to
you, Kate.
these people.
Would you rather they aren't listened to? Would you rather they just have to go and speak to their GP and don't go and get referred to a specialist who understands and is able to give good advice and experience?
No, I would rather that. I'd just rather there wasn't this presumption, which seems to me to be very strong medical fashion at the moment, that the right response to these feelings is to move towards what is effectively a sex change.
Well, I'm frankly grateful that there's any support out there at all when we know that the majority of NHS trusts are now in the red.
Thank you. And now we go to the Sunday Times front page with you, Peter. What's been reported on there?
This is one of the most astonishing stories I've seen for many weeks. David Kelly's body has been exhumed from its grave in Oxford Churchyard, and it appears quite likely that it's been cremated. And this seems to have been because of people who believe, in my view wrongly, that David Kelly was murdered, have been putting placards and other things on the grave, and it's become a focus of political activism, and the family have been upset by it. This just seems to me to be... the story is by Andrew Gilligan, by the way, famous, of course, for his initial BBC involvement in the whole Kelly affair. I just think this is one of the most amazing things that I've seen for some time, and it draws attention again to the curious beliefs that many people have about David Kelly. I myself have never seen any reason to assume that he'd done anything other than commit suicide. I think he was under huge pressure, a lot of it coming from the government, and the last thing the government wanted was for him to die.
I mean, it must be truly horrible for the family. It must be horrible. I think it's probably a reminder of how conspiracy theories grow when people lose faith and trust in governments.
Thank you all. You've done your work for us. You've been here since 8 picking these stories, which of course is 9 now. And because we think you've got so much more sleep, we want you to join in our item about apples. Do you want one of you to tell me how many apples are imported and how many? Do you want to have a go at that, Kate?
I would not have a clue. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Nearly 70% of our apples are imported.
Are they really?
I'm sure it's worse than that. They're imported and then they're chilled and then they arrive in supermarkets and you take them home. By the time you've got them home, they've gone soft.
I think you do. You do now. You all do want to try.
Apples anymore.
Travel with us, and Francis, you're not escaping. Travel with us now to Stocks Farm in Suckley in Worcestershire for our apple item to end your presence with us this morning with thanks. Ali, welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning, Paddy.
Our guests here are wondering about apple. Give us some names of great British varieties.
Oh, there are some amazing names. Often if you hear the word kernel or seedling or pippin in the name, it's because it's the daughter of an original variety. So we've got varieties like red pippin, we've got varieties like Ashmead's Kernel. We've got varieties like Yarlington Mill. Yarlington Mill is a lovely cider apple, and the original tree was found in the crack of a watermill in Yarlington in Somerset.
And is it correct that the weather has boosted the flavour of all apples, those horrible watery old foreign things, and the lovely homegrown one?
We've had a funny old apple growing year this year. We all started our growing season in the spring with some late frosts, and that actually looked like it was going to curtail the crop quite significantly across the whole of Europe, not just in the UK. And then it was as if a magic wand had been waved as we went through August and September, and we could see a lot more apples emerging on the trees than we'd anticipated. So it's been a funny year, but we've had a lovely long growing season, and that's given us beautiful quality apples, really good flavour, really complex, lovely flavours. And that's the one thing about...
Can I ask you something?
Yes, of course.
First, I mean, the names of these apples are like poems, but I have for several years been unable to find what I regard as a proper Cox's Orange Pippin anywhere in England. There are things which are sold as Cox's Orange Pippins, but they have shiny skins, not rough ones. Where can I get a decent English apple fresh from a tree now?
Well, you should be able to go into any of your major supermarkets and buy beautiful, fresh British apples. And especially now at this time of year, it's a little bit late for Cox now. A nice apple which is related to Cox is Red Windsor, which is something which we grow here. It was actually discovered in our village, so perfect.
And Ali,
British apple.
Ali, here's Francis O'Grady of the TUC with an apple question.
I've got a question. Which
Yes,
makes
Francis.
the best cider, Kent or Somerset apples?
I would have to say Herefordshire and Worcestershire apples. And firstly, we don't grow many cider apples in Kent. The big cider growing areas in the UK are Somerset, but 70% of cider apples are grown in Herefordshire and Worcestershire. And for my money, the best variety would be Dabinet.
And Francis, do you ask that because you are a cider drinker?
I am a connoisseur.
And it can be very strong cider, I notice, myself in my own investigations. But I wonder if we go to you, Kate, you can have an apple question as an Olympian. Health? Do you want to, I mean, do you munch an apple a day to keep winning gold medals in Rio?
Apples, we often have an apple as part of our recovery strategy. I was given some Suffolk cider actually this week as a gift for doing some coaching, as you do. So yeah, I'm going to... maybe send you a bottle.
Don't investigate it too hard.
And then just controversially for me, I've always thought that if I had a choice between an apple and an onion, I might actually choose an onion because it's a bit more versatile, Ali. Do you think that's an awful thing to say to an apple grower?
No, not at all. I think both are very versatile, actually, and indeed can be used together in certain dishes. I think the great thing about an apple is, unlike a big round onion, you can eat an apple raw and enjoy it. With your onion, you really need to cook it. You can do both with an apple.
Sinking your teeth into an onion on a crisp autumn morning isn't really very attractive, is it?
Well, look, thank you for cheering us all up. We know the news is grim, and thank you all very much for taking part. We had the news review with Francis O'Grady, Peter Hitchens and Kate Richardson-Walsh, and then we asked them to join our Apple item for reasons that we've long ago forgotten.